He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney.
And this is
The Musical Innertube.
Now, you may ask, why is this podcast called The Musical Innertube?
And we may reply, because that's its name, of course.
Now, how did this podcast get that name?
Back in college, we hosted a radio show. Once, we tried to introduce a soothing musical interlude.
Instead, we messed up and wound up introducing a soothing musical innertube, and the name stuck.
So here we are, hundreds of years later, still talking
to interesting people about their interesting lives.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
Hi, everyone. Last week, you remember we were talking to John's nephew, Justin Timpane, who has made lots of movies. He's also made music, and he is a podcaster, and he is very interested in Star Trek. And is it Star Wars, too, Justin, that you're into?
It's Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate, Starbucks.
Anything,
all of it is really good.
Anything nerdly that is into it. Last time we talked about his independent films, including a bunch of Ninja Warrior films. But now we'd like to concentrate on those podcasts and the music. So let's take the music first. John, what was the album that Justin did that really knocked you off your feet?
Well, there's an album called Hers. And Justin sat me in the car and played me 3 or 4 tracks from it recently. And I'd already heard them, but being in the car with the guy who made the music is always a treat. And so maybe go back to the album. Pardon me?
It was a kidnapping, basically.
It really was. He wouldn't open the car, and I was running out of oxygen. So I let him play these for me. And Justin, let's start by talking about you as a musician. How many albums have you made? So many albums.
I mean, if you count an album as a collection of more than 6 original songs, then I think we could see 15 or 16.
See, I've made 4.
That's not true. You know what? I'm going to call you out on that. I've known you my whole life. There's always been every couple of years a new tape or something. Since digital media has come out in the last 20 years, you've made 4. Okay. When I was growing up, I have at least 3 tapes of at least 20 songs apiece.
You're kidding.
So, yeah, there's when's my remake of Thunderhead coming? That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
I'm waiting for that.
Thunderhead was one of my early non-hits. Well, okay. See, Justin, he's good because he's on the distinctions that are brought up by advances in technology. Because I used to make tapes like a lot of musicians did. I used to make tapes of songs that I've written or played on, and they got distributed. And that's the way you did what we're talking about. But Justin, I think, so when you say you've made 15 albums, how many of those were tapes? How many of those started out as something other than digital?
I'm only counting the ones that were not tapes.
Oh, okay.
So there's also an additional 30, 40 songs that I've made on tapes, which I can talk about a little bit. I started on your 4-track recorder when I was 14. I went, my very first experience recording was the Christmas of my 10th grade year. So I guess it was 15. And my family had come to your house in New Jersey. And I went up I broke a pair of your headphones, which I still remember to this day. I went up to your room with a 4-track recorder, which I knew that you and my Uncle Kevin both had used, in recording stuff. And you had a drum machine and a guitar and a keyboard and a 4-track recorder, where what you could do, for those who aren't familiar with the way it worked, when you used to listen to a tape would be in stereo. So you'd have left and right ears on that tape. And if you were to flip the tape, you'd have more music in stereo on the other side, on left and right ears. So a tape would actually have space for 4 tracks of audio, side 1 left, side 1 right, side 2 left, side 2 right. You could actually get a special tape recorder that would let you record on just one of those tracks, and then a second one of those tracks, and a third one of those tracks, and then a fourth one of those tracks separately. So you could harmonize with yourself or record some music and include that with yourself. The trick that everybody knew is that if you recorded on 3 tracks, most tape recorders had a little button that you could just record those 3 tracks all in mono, which means it's the same on the left and right, into that empty 4th track. And then you could erase those 3 and have them again. So you could really do like 7 tracks on a 4-track recorder. And that's sort of the way that it was done. How to do what you can with those 7 tracks was how you recorded music. if you were not in an actual studio. If you're recording in your home, if you're building a home studio, that's how you would start.
Yeah.
How do you fill those 7 tracks and make it sound as stereophonic as you could by also having, multi-generations of degrading audio? And it's just what you had to do.
Yeah.
And I stayed for 3 days and I recorded my first 6 songs. I wrote and recorded 6 songs in your little recording room in the house at the time.
Yeah.
And that is where it all started. So yes, we all started on tapes, and I specifically started on your tape deck.
What is it that makes you do music? I mean, you were doing all this other artistic things. You were acting, you were directing, you were funding and distributing movies, but you also have always made music. What's that all about?
I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday. And specifically, I've been sort of down in the dumps in the last, few weeks, trying to figure out why. And she was the one who pointed out and said, well, what have you been working on creatively? And I said, oh, I've been working on, I did this film, The Strangle of Ivy, and I've been working on, the paperwork side of that, getting into festivals, that sort of thing. And everything I've been doing, for my company Endlight and for, and for the creative area of my life has all been sort of administrative for the last 9 months. And Kelly, my wife, noticed that my mood just kind of went down, 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 down as that happened. If I'm not making something, if I'm not sort of creating some kind of music or art or something, I kind of go a little crazy. It has always been the way that I expressed myself, from always, you're first of all, if you kind of ever seek out, I'm going to plug you. If you can ever seek out Car Radio Dog, it is an amazing group of talented musicians you can find on Spotify, including my Uncle John.
Thank you very much.
So when you listen to stuff like Car Radio Dog, a lot of it is, it's a little more esoteric sometimes than mine. Mine has received honest criticism of it's too hard on your sleeve. I just all the emotions are always just right front and center. It's always just my heart is screaming and I got to put it out into some kind of music. Whereas when I write movies, it is much more how thoughtful and artful can I be? Music or for movies, music is much more, I just got stuff in me and I got to get it out. So that it always sort of starts there. I sit down at a piano or with a guitar and I'm like, I'm so angry at this. And then that, an hour and a half later, that's a rap song.
You are crafting music that wasn't there before, which is one of these mysteries about the creative human being, that we are able to make things that weren't there before. You make movies that weren't there before. You make songs that weren't there before. Podcasts. I mean, that's what creativity is about. I want to go straight to Hers. This album that you made 2021, is that when it was?
Yeah, it's when I 21 or 22. It's I finished it right around the end of 21, so I can't, somewhere between November 21 and February 22 is right when I finished that.
And this is an album that arose directly from personal experience, a family experience. You want to talk about that?
I mean, I need to be careful what I say. Someone that I'm close to went through some tough stuff. And when she told me about it, a lot of the things that she told me enraged me. And I was like, these are topics that I don't hear, about, specifically about the terrible way that some men treat some women. And I felt like it was something that I heard a lot in women's music. I hear a lot of women talking about that. You can go back, into my childhood, into Sheryl Crow. You can go further back into the 60s and
Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell. Yeah. Suzanne Vega did it. You hear, that you hear these thoughts and feelings from women, but I've never really heard an album where there's a man railing against what men at their worst can be like. And so I made the album as a gift to this person, and also to sort of put my feelings out when it comes to being an ally for women. And that's sort of what the album rose out of.
You're making such a good point, because we really don't hear male rockers rocking against our gender. And I mean, we are the folks who do 90% of the murders and 87% of all the other terrible things. And I don't know of an album that a male artist has written that has that as its starting point. And hers really does that. That's the first thing that makes it very, very original.
I mean, I think, unfortunately, if you look at the statistics, I would guarantee you that each one of us right now in the back of our heads, and every single male listening, can think right now of someone they know who has been horrifically abused by a man. We can all think of someone that we are close to that has happened to.
Mm-hmm.
And it has made us angry. There's lots of music about being angry about war. There's lots of music about being angry about politics or about the economy. Lots of music about being angry at personal slights. You know, what is more enraging than this? Why has this not been something that if every single man listening, including every single male musician, can think of someone to whom this has happened? Why is this not more of a subject? And so that sort of was the impetus for let's do this. Let's put it all out there and all the horror and the recovery and ultimately the hope that can come out of this thing that happens to 1 out of every 5 women. Yeah, why not put that out there? So that was sort of the impetus to kind of go, hey, we hear you, and we recognize what we've done. And the songs, the album, like most of my albums, I can't define the genre. You know, if you want a rap song, it's on there. If you want an industrial metal song, it's on there. If you want a waltz played entirely in calliope,
yes,
it's on there.
Yes.
But the through line also switches points of view throughout the album, where sometimes I'm a man who is encountering this woman. Sometimes I'm writing from the point of view of the woman. Sometimes I'm writing from the point of view of the abuser. To go all across and when I say writing from the point of view of the abuser, it is not complimentary. And so I wanted to show that that as an ally, I understand all of the roles that we have, both as a responsibility to be an ally and also to take responsibility. I guarantee that many men have things they look back on and go, I wish I had not been that way at that time. I am right now. I don't know how many people saw the Barbie movie. Everybody should. Every man should. Everyone in a relationship should. I am wearing right now. I'm going to show you guys. The audience cannot see. I'm wearing my shirt that says, I am Knuff. That is my shirt today. So yeah, it was a message that was important to me. I guess, John, the other thing that was open to me, that started my revolution in music and really came to a head both with hers, and then subsequent to hers, I've also written a score for a movie, which we can talk about a little later, is that the tools I feel like have finally, just in the last 5 years, caught up with the imagination, where it truly is that now anything that I can possibly think of that I want to do in audio, I can do from my home computer. Like anything that I can imagine. If I want to make a score that sounds like John Williams, I am not restricted by the quality of the audio I can produce. I'm only restricted by my own ability to write it. And that was the other huge change, is that there is, for less than like $3,000, you can put together a studio where the piano that you're playing on your little electric piano is actually playing through a live recording of the piano at Abbey Road Studios. And you can choose which of the 6 mics in the studio you want to have pick up that piano. And that's something that you can do for $20 a month. And those tools made it possible. And I don't want to, do free advertisement for these things on your show, but there are really readily available tools that anybody could go use and just start recording whatever it is that's in their head.
Let's talk about the recording of this for a second, because there have been major musicians who have done albums where they played all the instruments. And I'm thinking about, being the old guy that I am, I'm thinking about like Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder and people like that. John, when he plays with Car Radio Dog, he's one of several people. So they all get a chance to add to the bass line that John or one of the other musicians has created. But you're doing it all by yourself, all alone. How do you keep track of everything? And more importantly, how do you look at it with a critical enough eye to say, yeah or no, this needs something else?
That's a really good question. First of all, I want to correct you just slightly and give credit where it's due. I'm not a very good guitarist when it comes to doing a lead guitar. So there are some guitar solos on the album that I did not play, that my friend Thomas played. And given that there are some female points of view, and I happen to have my wife, who's a wonderful singer, in my house with me, she does sing on like 4 of the tracks. So I have had some collaboration in there, but not in the writing of the songs. The editorial process is absolutely valid. I have my own ears first. I have hearing loss in my left ear. So it is, making sure I get the mix right is something that's hard for me to get. So for myself, and I'm sure every independent musician does this, I have my headphones, and then I have my stereo speakers, and then I have the dreaded car listen, where I go out and I sit in my car in front of my house for hours on end to listening to 6 different versions of each song, trying to make sure that they all play in a car the way that I would want them to. Then I have an AI program that goes through and makes sure that it mixes in the way that you would want it for a record. And then after that, I have a trusted group of friends that I send it out to, who are also musicians, who've also produced things, who I'm like, hey, what do you think of this so far? What about this for lyrics this time? I went exclusively to different women. And I said, where am I missing the mark? So I have some very, my wife, of course, who again is just here in the house. My friend Tara had listened to it. I have a bunch of people whose opinion I respect when it comes to that. And then I just sort of, do it. I try not to dilute my initial idea. The great thing about doing the way that I do it is I can, for better or worse, be damned for myself. If it's good, I get all the credit. And if it's not, then I have no one to blame but myself. So I do it that way. I could probably use a little more oversight because I frankly, every album I ever made, I love. It's the greatest. It's better than the Beatles when I'm done with it. And then 3 years later, when I listen to it, I'm like, oh no, what is this garbage that I put out?
That's exactly the plight of being a musician, is listening to yourself several years later. You go, okay.
I thought this was the greatest.
Yeah. Now, how do you get it distributed? We talked about that last time on movies. How do you get your music out there for everybody to listen to?
Well, in terms of the pop stuff, it's really just more about a hobby that I try to have break even. And it's been the precursor to the movies, been the precursor to being able to write music for movies, which is a little different. So there are a number of services where you can go and get your music onto Spotify and put it out there so the world can hear it. I wish I could say I made any kind of significant money with it. But for me, it's just about getting people to hear it and the story getting told, and that's that. So there's any number of things online. Within 20 minutes, you pay $50 a year, and they will let you upload as many songs as you want. As long as it meets certain standards, and those standards are low.
What's a good song to play to sort of stand for the album Hers? What's a song that you think we could play right now?
Sure. If there was a song on Hers that I think exemplifies both the energy of the album and also a song that I'm proud of, I would say probably there's a song called Lost Darkness. That it's a rock and roll electronica song. And that's also the song where my friend did the incredible guitar solo. But it's a song that is specifically about the journey into disassociation that happens while trauma is happening. So it takes the story of a teenage girl sitting in her room, trying to, be sort of that stereotypical I'm a moody teenager, who then encounters someone who is truly abusive, and over the course of the abuse starts to lose themselves in disassociation. Light, fun, easy stuff.
Okay, very good. This is Lost Darkness, written and performed mostly by Justin Timpane from his really quite striking and unforgettable album, Hers.
I'm safe at home, at the bedside writing poems. As the sun shines through the window pane, I'm casting shadows. It flatters me, this ginger house is sweet. It beckons me to step inside where I don't want to go. Butterflies, the knife that opens wide. These living tombs and smoky rooms are too familiar. No teenage dreams, just hypocrites and fiends. It locks the door and screams like devils sing until I fall away from me forever. Gone, this corpse is all that I've got left. I fall away from me and never hold. It takes it all, this lost darkness. I'm so impure, it tells me so, I'm sure. Like fingernails on wood, it's flying hands assailing. No second thoughts for lessons I've been taught. Suppressing all my thoughts, repress it all. I start to fall away from me forever. Gone, this corpse is all that I've got left. I fall away from me and never hold. It takes it all, this lost darkness. Nothing left, embrace the nothingness. This crushing, dark, disgusting mess gets left if I just fall away from me forever. Gone, this corpse is all that I've got left. I fall away from me and never hold. It takes it all, this lost darkness.
One thing that I think we need to say now that we've heard a clip from Hers is just to repeat what Justin has pointed out, is that we now can do stuff the Beatles couldn't do. There's stuff that we can do that goes beyond what the Beatles did, and everybody holds the Beatles up as the standard of amazing production. And I think you'd have to admit in things like Sgt. Pepper's and Abbey Road, especially.
George Martin, yeah.
Yeah, you see some amazing stuff going on. And in Sgt. Pepper's, they had only 4 tracks. So they had exactly as many tracks as you had in that little tape player of mine. And today you have an infinity of tracks. You can't use an infinity of tracks because it would sound lousy, but you've got them. And you can correct.
But this is what is so cool is that you want to use the Beatles as the example. The piano in that song in Lost Darkness is a piano recorded at Abbey Road Studios. That's
the sound you selected for that keyboard.
Yes, it is. You buy a subscription that is basically actual instruments being played by virtuoso musicians, sitting in front of like 12 mics, playing the notes over and over again. And then I have a subscription to those sounds. So when I hit a C sharp on the piano, it correlates that to an actual recording of an actual pianist playing an actual piano in Abbey Road Studios. And I have that for the London Symphony Orchestra, where there's an orchestra actually playing the things, actual guitarists actually playing. So when it's funny, we use the Beatles as I'm actually playing instruments in their studio from my home office. It's crazy. It's crazy what you can do.
We'll return to our podcast in just a moment, but first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Justin Timpane is an artistic renaissance man, movie maker, actor, writer, musician, podcaster, and cultural influencer.
Justin has produced, written, and directed movies such as Ninjas vs. Zombies of 2008, Ninjas vs. Vampires 2010, and Ninjas vs. Monsters 2012.
He followed those up with Trek Off, the motion picture 2016, A Christmas Cancellation and The Distance, both 2020, and this year's The Strangle of Ivy. The music you're listening to now is part of the soundtrack to the Strangle of Ivy film. Justin composed the music.
Justin is also a very accomplished songwriter and musician with albums that include 3 of 2008, Unlovesick, Love Songs 1991 to 2017, and a real masterpiece titled simply Hers of 2021.
Check out the Facebook page for Justin's production company, Endlight Entertainment. It's at facebook.com/endlightent. That's ENDLIGHTENT.
And now we return you to the musical Innertube already in progress. So, we have a few minutes left. Let's talk about podcasting. Now, you have a podcast which isn't dead, although it hasn't done much in the last,
It's in a coma.
It's in a coma. But the nice thing about podcasts is you don't have to be like Don and John and try and have an episode every week. You can wait for a couple of months because you've got an audience. But I'd love you to talk about Trek Off, which is the podcast we're talking about. How old is Trek Off? If we say it's still alive, how old is it?
If we say it's still alive, and the caveat being that that largely in the last couple of years, because the film work has really picked up, both my film work and then work that I'm hired out to do. I've not had the time to put into podcasting like I used to, which was once a week for a really long time. So I want to thank you guys for letting me do this. Every month or so I appear on someone else's podcast, which helps me keep my chops up a little bit. Trek Off right now I think would be 12 years old. And when we started Trek Off, we were doing it once a week. So I think we got hundreds of sometimes 2-hour long episodes. So at least 1,000 hours of Trek Off that we've recorded since we started it. My podcast partner, Alexia, had a couple of health issues at one point, and then right when she got better, I then started getting the film work, so I wasn't able to do it as much. But over the course of it, we got to meet some really, really interesting people. We did make a movie about it.
One of the few podcasts that has been made into a movie, I might add.
Yes, I think it is the first movie about a podcast that has ever existed. I've looked it up and I cannot find one that has existed earlier about a real podcast. There are movies where there are fictional podcasters. but not one where like, here's a podcast that's to make a movie of it. There are now many more of those. But it was so much fun. We got to interview, everything from like my buddy who likes Star Trek to all the way up to Mark Okrand, who wrote the Klingon language. And sort of everyone in between. It would be weird. We'd have, here's my friend Eric who played a Klingon. When I was a very young actor, I played a Star Trek character at a theme park for 3 years, and that was my first job. And I was like, here's my buddy who did this. And then the next week we were having what's his name? Ron Howard's brother, who's in everything, which for the life of me,
Clint Howard, I think.
Clint Howard, thank you. Sorry, Clint. But we'd have Clint Howard on the next week. And it was so fun to jump in between meeting all of these sort of nerd heroes. I got to interview the greatest American hero, William Catt. And I was like, I watched your show like religiously. Like when I was a kid, I did not miss an episode. And so we got to do that for a long time. And that was super fun to play in the sandbox. I wish, frankly, that the show was more active now, because we stopped right when Star Trek Discovery came out, which is the beginning of the new glut of Star Trek. Star Trek was dead. Star Trek was a dead franchise until Chris Pine and J.J. Abrams showed up and made like 3 movies over the course of like 8 years. And then Star Trek was dead again. And now, like in the last 3 years, there have been 5 new Star Trek TV shows that are all on the air doing the best Star Trek, in my opinion, that has ever been done.
Let's talk about Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds is probably the best Trek since The Next Generation. Although I'd say something about the third season of Star Trek Picard was also some of the most beautiful television I think that's ever been produced, and such a love letter to everything that was The Next Generation.
It was a Next Generation reunion. It was just so. I mean, I spoiler alert for skip ahead 30 seconds. Spoiler alert for the third season of Star Trek Picard. In the last 2 episodes, they rebuilt from scratch the set of the old Enterprise D, and had all of the old actors, everybody from the show that came out in 1987, sitting on the same set that they were on the show that I grew up on. And, for people like me, that hits you right in the feels. They hit you right in it's nostalgia to the extreme, which is, I guess, the name of the game in Hollywood right now. But it really did work. And for anyone with a passing knowledge of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds just did a musical episode, which is delightful to watch everyone on the show singing and dancing about the thrusters. And hearing how Spock emotes with a great bit of trying to figure out a romantic relationship Spock is in, and he has been dumped, and he says the equation doesn't compute. I'm here searching for Y, and I'm the X, which is both that he's an X, but also he's speaking in terms of calculus, Y's and X's. Yeah.
And that's how Spock would sing a ballad. It is wonderfully conceived, and I'm having a great time with it.
How do you feel about the way that these 2 franchises are expanding their universe and telling new stories and explaining parts of old stories? Do you like the directions they're going in?
That's a story. That's a question with 2 answers. The first answer is how do I personally feel about it? I love it. Give me more. Give me more all the time. I want more Star Wars, more Star Trek all the time. I love it. I delight in it. I think Ahsoka is one of the most fun things I've seen since like that first J.J. Abrams film came out, The Force Awakens. I think that nothing has felt as Star Wars as that. So personally, Star Trek, Star Wars, give me all of it all the time. I am also acutely aware that I am not, let's talk about your younger brother, John, my father, the erstwhile Mike Timpane. He and my stepmother have a passing love for Star Wars. They like Star Wars just well enough. They see all the movies. They love it. They love Star Wars in that capacity. And when Star Wars, The Mandalorian first came out, they were like, "Yay, Mandalorian! This is great. There's new Star Wars on TV." And then Andor came out, like, "Oh, this is really good." And Andor was legitimately a spectacular piece of television, Star Wars or not. But they're not watching Ahsoka. they're not watching. And same thing with when Discovery came out. I knew a lot of Star Trek fans. Yay, new Star Trek! But now you got Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds and Prodigy and people are sort of drifting away. And the fact of the matter is especially when you look at Marvel. I'm also a huge Marvel head, and I quit for the very first time on a Marvel show halfway through Secret Invasion. I couldn't do it after a while. And I think part of the reason is that I know that in 2 months, there's going to be another one and maybe it will be better. I almost quit on Book of Boba Fett because it was just not very good. And I think that one of the problems that you're having and that you're, forever, Star Trek was 6 hours of content through my entire childhood. Then the prequels came out and it was 12 hours of content. And even with all the new movies coming out, you're really looking at 20 hours of content total for filmed Star Wars until the TV show started. And then in the last 4 years, there's an additional 60 hours of content. And it's just, as a matter of math, not going to be as focused as people would take 2 years to put out 1 2-hour movie. Now every 9 months, they're putting out 10 hours of show. And the quality will vary, but also there is a sense of it being not as special as it used to be. When a Star Wars movie came out, even the bad ones, you were like, new Star Wars movies, look at this. It's just hard to get as excited when I know already that when Ahsoka, which is my favorite of the Star Wars series, is done, that, The Acolyte is coming in just like 4 months. And it's just hard to get people like my dad, who used to get excited about Star Wars, they get the eye roll now a little bit. Oh, it's another Star Wars. Oh my gosh. And I think that there is something to be said about scarcity breeding delight.
I also think, like, my son, Jonathan, has followed Star Wars all along, and he watched the animated ones, which is where Ahsoka comes from. The Star Wars Rebels and the other one.
And Clone Wars, yeah.
I didn't watch those. And I got a couple of feet into the first one of Ahsoka, and I said, I'm not going to be able to follow this because I don't know who these people are. And I don't know why it's so necessary to find this general, because I didn't watch the prequel, if you will. I didn't watch the animated stuff. So I'm kind of lost. So I'm backing off from that a little bit. And I think that's part of it too, is that for somebody who's neck deep in everything Star Wars or everything Star Trek, the expanding universes are easy to keep up with. But for somebody who dips in and out of it, which is maybe 80, 90% of the population, it's a little tough to follow.
It's what was so brilliant about The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian dropped you and says, okay, you kind of know what Star Wars is. Here's a bunch of new people you never heard of before, doing a whole bunch of new stuff that you never thought of before. So I ran into this problem when I was writing the sequels to the Ninjas movies, which were, by no means giant successes, but they had their fan base. So when I'm writing the second Ninjas movie, I cannot assume that everybody has seen the first Ninjas movie, because most people haven't. At the same time, I can't just re-explain everything that happened in the first Ninjas movie, because everybody who has seen it is going to be bored to tears as I retell the same story again. And I think even more than Star Wars, I think Marvel has fallen into this pit where even people who liked the Marvel movies are going to be like I loved Avengers Endgame. I think it's an achievement in film. But if I were to go to someone who never watched Marvel, go, hey, this is the third highest grossing movie of all time. It's incredibly well written. The acting is great. The moments are wonderful. And all you need to do to watch it is watch these 6 movies. It gets to the point where it starts to feel like homework. And I can see how you'd feel that way about Ahsoka, because Dave Filoni, who writes that show, is in a pickle, isn't he? Where he's like, for you, he would have to retell the stories of these characters, which for me would be really dull. And vice versa, he has to do that balance. And when you were continuing to write 1,000 hours in one universe, you're going to just have that happen more and more and more and more. And I do, frankly, if I were, here's my hot take. If I were Bob Iger right now, I'd quit my job and give the actors and the writers what they want. And then when that's done, I would take a real look at Kathleen Kennedy's running of Lucasfilm and say, it's time to pull back and let's have a Star Wars. I think a new Star Wars movie every 3 or 4 years with maybe 1 or 2 shows in between those, where the shows are telling some kind of original story like Andor did, I think that's you're going to keep people interested. But right now, Star Wars is like 7-Eleven. It's just like, it's always there all the time. And how can you get excited? Like, I love lemon cake. I have lemon cake for my birthday every year. If I was given lemon cake after every meal, I wouldn't want it as much anymore. And I think I think the inability of the studios to create independent IP because they're afraid of their tentpole falling apart up until this summer has been problematic, in that you don't have any new IP for people to latch onto. And as I said in your last show, if you look at The Flash and Indiana Jones, which should have been home runs, and Indiana Jones, the new movie, hot take, it was great. It was so much better than the 4th film. It was a delight to watch. I was ready for it to be terrible, and it was really good. But you can't hold up an entire studio system on films that started in 1980. You need new IP. And instead, they're just milking the cows for everything that they're worth. And I think you're going to see, prediction, 5 years from now, there will be no Star Wars, there will be no Star Trek, and Marvel will be every year and a half until something can rejuvenate it. Because there's too much. It's gonna bleed itself out. By the way, here, I'm going to teach a little lesson here, just for fun for your listeners. If you ever want to figure out if a movie is going to make its money back, the budget of film is $200 million. You have to assume the film has to make $600 million in the box office to break even. Why is that? Because, of course, the movie theaters have to keep a certain chunk of it, and you're also spending a certain amount on advertising. So by the time, and a certain amount goes to the back end of people who have deals. So the rule of thumb is somewhere between twice the budget and 3 times the budget is what is needed to have a film reach that, being in the black. And it just has not been happening across the board, because the first Mission Impossible movie came out in 1996. The DC movies, really started with Man of Steel, which is 15 years old, which only came 3 years after the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, which is now you're going back, nearly 18 years. And now the idea that the entire system's got to be held up by these intellectual properties that started in the 90s, it's not going to work. And there's so little being produced. People are craving something new. And if Hollywood doesn't give it to them, then the nerds are going to find somewhere else to go.
Yeah. Listening to you, Justin, I realized that you need a podcast. And anyway, I just want to say this has been really a great 5 hours talking to you. And, I don't know what to say your latest thing is. I suppose, what would you say?
Strangle of Ivy.
Strangle of Ivy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right now, if you are, not just for my film, but for any films out there, there are independent film festivals that are happening somewhere near you. Wherever you're listening from, somewhere near you. Strangle of Ivy is going to be playing at the DC Shorts Festival if you're in the DC area in late September, and then going to be playing at the Sick Chick Flicks Festival in North Carolina on October 7th. And we have a number of festivals across the board. So that's not a film that I wrote or directed, but I produced it, and I wrote all the music for it, which has garnered a few awards, which makes me feel happy. So it's something I am very, very proud of, and again, a very feminist film from one of my dearest friends and genius, Tara Garwood, and her writing partner, Sarah Coco-Smith. Strangle of Ivy, you can certainly search the term Strangle of Ivy on YouTube or Facebook, and you'll probably find a trailer for it. And drop by, say hi, give us some support, and we'll find a way for you to be able to see that.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Our lovely little podcast is available everywhere good podcasts are found. Listen on your favorite platform, and if you like what you hear, please give us a good rating.
And spread the word. Tell your friends about the Innertube, and let them know they can subscribe to the podcast on our website, musicalinnertube.com.
There you can listen to all of our podcasts, see pictures and biographies of our guests, and contact us. You can even click on the microphone button in the lower right corner to leave us a voicemail.
And don't forget to leave your email address on our Talk to the Tube page so we can stay in touch.
And you can email us directly at musicalinnertube@gmail.com.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.